My name is Nora Bennett, and I'm a paramedic. I've been riding ambulances for 9 years now, and before that I was a firefighter's daughter who grew up thinking sirens were just the sound of normal life. I chose this job because I'm good in a crisis. I can hold a stranger's hand while they're dying and not flinch. I can run on 4 hours of sleep and still find a vein on the first try. My scrubs smell like hand sanitizer and adrenaline, and I have never once been ashamed of that smell until my mother made me feel like I should be. It was the second week of November when she called. I was sitting in the back of the rig after a rough call, still wearing my gloves, peeling them off finger by finger while my partner finished the paperwork. I picked up expecting the usual. Maybe something about her knee replacement. Maybe a question about what I was bringing for Thanksgiving. Instead, there was a pause, the kind that means whatever's coming has been rehearsed in front of a mirror. "Nora, honey," she said, "about Thanksgiving this year." I told her I'd already bought the turkey, the good one from the butcher she likes, and I was planning my pecan pie, the one my father used to ask for twice before he passed. Another pause. "We're doing something a little different this year. Your brother Caleb is bringing someone. It's serious, apparently. He wants to make a good impression." I said that was wonderful, and I meant it. Caleb is 28, and for most of his 20s, he'd been cycling through women who lasted a month and ended in screaming phone calls in our mother's driveway. If he'd found someone real, I was happy for him. Genuinely. "The thing is," my mother continued, and her voice dropped into that register she uses when she's about to hand me something she doesn't want to be holding, "He asked me last night. He said he doesn't want you there." I went completely still. The rig was idling, the radio chattering low in the background, but I felt like everything in me had stopped moving. He said your job might make her uncomfortable, that you'd talk about work or she'd asked what you do and it would be. Mom hesitated. His word, awkward. He said working as a paramedic isn't exactly what he wants Vivian's family thinking of when they think of us. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just sat there with one glove still on, staring at the ceiling of the ambulance. "We didn't want to upset you," Mom added, filling the silence with something that wasn't quite an apology. "But it's important to Caleb that this goes smoothly. You understand, don't you?" Something in me went very quiet. Not the kind of quiet that means you're fine. The kind that means you've stepped back from a ledge, and you're deciding, very carefully, what to do next. I thought about arguing. I thought about asking her since when saving people's lives for a living was something to apologize for. I thought about asking why she hadn't said no to him on my behalf, why "you understand, don't you" had become the family's answer to everything uncomfortable. Instead, I said, "I understand." And I meant something entirely different by it than she thought I did. I sat in the ambulance bay parking lot for 20 minutes after my shift ended, engine off, watching a kid 2 cars down practice skateboard tricks in the dying light, falling and getting back up, like it cost him nothing. I envied that. I let myself feel exactly how much it hurt. The specific surgical humiliation of being told your presence is a liability to people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, that the life you've built saving other people's families could somehow be a stain on your own. I didn't call my best friend Priya that night, even though she would have shown up with a bottle of wine and a list of things to say to my brother. I didn't text my coworker Desmond, who would have driven to Caleb's apartment just to stand on his porch and stare at him. I just sat with it, let it hurt clean through, the way I'd learned to let pain move through a patient instead of fighting it. What nobody in my family knew, what I hadn't told a single one of them, was that 6 weeks earlier, I'd been quietly recruited onto a pilot program with the county. A new advanced field response unit, the kind of position that meant I wasn't just riding in the back anymore. I'd be running point on critical trauma calls, training new medics, making triage decisions that used to belong to doctors. The promotion came with a title, a serious raise, and a write-up in the regional EMS bulletin that my supervisor said was the kind of thing that gets you noticed nationally. I hadn't told my family because I wanted the paperwork finalized first. I was going to tell them at Thanksgiving, over pecan pie, with everyone in the room. They'd taken that moment from me without even knowing it existed, so I decided to let them have their dinner. I was curious what 5 days would teach them. Thanksgiving came and went without me. I expected it to feel sadder than it did. Priya invited me over, but I told her I needed the quiet, and she didn't push, because that's the kind of friend she is. I cooked for myself. Turkey breast, since a whole bird felt absurd for one person, mashed potatoes, and yes, the pecan pie, because I wasn't going to let my brother take that away from me too. I ate at my own table, in the apartment I pay for with money I earned doing 12-hour shifts that most people couldn't survive a single one of. It was peaceful in a way I hadn't expected, almost clarifying. What I didn't know was what was happening across town at my parents' house whilst I sat there in that quiet. Caleb's girlfriend's name was Vivian Marsh, 26, the kind of composed that makes a room go a little quieter when she walks in. That's how my mother described her to me later, stumbling over her words, trying to explain everything at once. Vivian had grown up the daughter of an ER physician and a trauma nurse. Her parents had met working a mass casualty event during their residencies. Emergency medicine wasn't something Vivian found embarrassing or beneath polite conversation. It was the language her whole family spoke at the dinner table. So when Caleb, somewhere over the green bean casserole, made an offhand comment about how his family was mostly business and finance people, very buttoned up, Vivian smiled politely and asked if he had siblings. Caleb said he had one sister. Vivian asked what she did. Caleb, without thinking it through, said she worked in emergency medicine, kind of, in the same tone you'd use to mention a parking ticket. Vivian set down her fork. She asked what kind of emergency medicine. Caleb said he wasn't totally sure of the specifics. Vivian asked if I worked in a hospital or in the field. Caleb said he thought I rode around in an ambulance, mostly. Vivian asked why I wasn't at dinner. And that's when my mother, who'd been quiet through the whole exchange, made the mistake of telling the truth. That Caleb had asked for me not to be invited because he was worried my job would make things awkward in front of Vivian's family. The table went still. Vivian looked at Caleb for a long moment, not with anger exactly, but with something colder and more unsettling than anger, the clear-eyed look of someone quietly recalculating everything she thought she knew about a person. She said evenly, without raising her voice, that she found that strange. That, in her family, the people who showed up at 3 a.m. to keep strangers alive were the most respected people anyone could bring to a table. That her mother had been doing chest compressions on a stranger in a parking lot the night before her own wedding rehearsal dinner, and still made it to the church the next morning with 20 minutes to spare. She said she would have loved to meet me. She said she'd like to be the judge of whether our worlds were really so different. Thank you very much. It didn't end the dinner, but it changed the temperature of the room in a way that never quite recovered. 5 days later, on a Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find my mother, my father, and Caleb standing on my front step like a delegation that had drawn straws on the drive over. My mother looked like she hadn't slept. My father looked like a man who'd been told to come and hadn't argued. Caleb looked like someone who'd spent 5 days fighting with himself and finally lost. I let them in. I made coffee because I wasn't raised to leave people standing in my kitchen without offering them something hot, even people who had recently made me feel like an embarrassment to my own last name. My mother started talking first, about Vivian, about the dinner, about what Caleb had said and how Vivian had responded to it. Then she looked at Caleb and said he had something he wanted to tell me. He stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. I found out about the promotion, he said finally. Priya posted something, tagged the county program. I waited. You're running advanced trauma response now. Training people. Since October, I said. The silence that followed was one of the most satisfying moments of my adult life, and I'll say that without an ounce of guilt. My father cleared his throat and said he was proud of me. I thanked him and noted, calmly, that it would have been nice to hear that before I was uninvited from a family holiday. My mother started crying. I handed her a napkin and let her cry, because some things need to be felt all the way through before they can be resolved. Caleb apologized. It wasn't a perfect apology. There was some self-justifying in it, a little too much explaining of what he'd been thinking, and not enough acknowledging of what he'd done. But it was real enough that I accepted it. Not entirely for his sake. For mine, because carrying that particular kind of resentment is heavy, and I already carry enough weight at work. What nobody said out loud, but everyone in that kitchen understood, was this. The exact thing Caleb had been ashamed of was the thing that had made Vivian respect me before she'd ever even met me. The 12-hour shifts, the blood-stained gloves, the calls that don't end well, the calls that do. He'd tried to hide me and ended up exposing himself instead. Vivian and I met for coffee the following week. She reached out through Caleb, which I thought was gracious of her, given she had no obligation to. We talked for almost 3 hours. She told me about growing up with parents who'd come home from 24-hour shifts and fall asleep at the dinner table mid-sentence, and how she'd decided in college that she wanted to marry into a family that understood that kind of exhaustion. not one that was embarrassed by it. I told her about the first time I ran a code by myself and got someone's heart back before the doctor even arrived. We exchanged numbers before we left. Real ones. The kind you actually use. Caleb is still with her. They seem to be doing well, from what I can tell. Last month, Vivian's mother reached out to me directly. The hospital where she works was looking to partner with the county on an advanced field trauma training initiative, and she'd specifically asked if I'd consult on it. My brother tried to keep me out of a room so I wouldn't embarrass him. Instead, he walked me straight into a room I didn't even know I needed to be in. I still smell like hand sanitizer and adrenaline at the end of a long shift. I'm still the one they call when things go wrong. And I have never, not once since that November, been ashamed of either.